down at him and the wonderful change that had come over him like a sunrise. Was this dreamy boy the man of 2 days ago? It seemed a distance immeasurable, yet it was 2 days only since that wedding eve when she had shrunk from him as he stood fierce and implacable. She could look back at that dark hour now, although she could not speak of it. She had seen destruction like sharp steel glittering in his eyes. Were these the same eyes? Was this youth with his black head of hair in her lap the creature with whom men did not trifle, whose hand knew how to deal death? Where had the man melted away to in this boy? For as she looked at him, he might have been no older than 19 to-day. Not even at their first meeting, that night when his freakish spirit was uppermost, had he looked so young. This change their hours upon the island had wrought, filling his face with innocence. By and by they made their nooning. In the afternoon she would have explored the nearer woods with him, or walked up the stream; but since this was to be their camp during several days, he made it more complete. He fashioned a rough bench and a table. Around their tent he built a tall windbreak for better shelter in case of storm. And for the fire he gathered and cut much wood, and piled it up. So they were provided for, and so for 6 days and nights they stayed, finding no day or night long enough. Once his hedge of boughs did them good service, for they had an afternoon of furious storm. The wind rocked the pines and ransacked the island, the sun went out, the black clouds rattled, and white bolts of lightning fell close by. The shower broke through the pine branches and poured upon the tent. But he had removed everything inside from where it could touch the canvas and so lead the water through, and the rain ran off into the ditch he had dug round the tent. While they sat within, looking out upon the bounding floods and the white lightning, she saw him glance at her apprehensively, and at once she answered his glance. "I am not afraid," she said. "If a flame should consume us together now, what would it matter?" And so they sat watching the storm till it was over, he with his face changed by her to a boy's, and she leavened with him. When at last they were compelled to leave the island, or see no more of the mountains, it was not a final parting. They would come back for the last night before their journey ended. Furthermore, they promised each other like two children to come here every year upon their wedding day. And like two children they believed that this would be possible. But in after years they did come, more than once, to keep their wedding day upon the island, and upon each new visit were able to say to each other, "Better than our dreams." For 30 days by the light of the sun and the campfire light they saw no faces except their own, and when they were silent it was all stillness, unless the wind passed among the pines, or some flowing water was near them. Sometimes at evening they came upon elk, or black-tailed deer, feeding out in the high parks of the mountains. And once from the edge of some concealing timber he showed her a bear, sitting with an old log lifted in its paws. She forbade him to kill the bear, or any creature that they did not require. He took her upward by trail and canyon, through the unfooted woods and along dwindling streams to their headwaters, lakes lying near the summit of the range, full of trout, with meadows of long grass and 1,000 flowers, and above these the pinnacles of rock and snow. They made their camps in many places, delaying several days here and one night there, exploring the high solitudes together, and sinking deep in their romance. Sometimes when he was at work with the horses, or intent on casting his brown hackle for a fish, she would watch him with eyes that were fuller of love than of understanding. Perhaps she never came wholly to understand him, but in her complete love for him she found enough. He loved her with his whole man's power. She had listened to him tell her in words of transport, "I could enjoy dying." Yet she loved him more than that. He had come to her from a smoking pistol, able to bid her farewell, and she could not let him go. At the last white-hot edge of ordeal, it was she who renounced, and he who had his way. Nevertheless, she found much more than enough, in spite of the sigh that now and again breathed through her happiness when she would watch him with eyes fuller of love than of understanding. They could not speak of that grim wedding eve for a long while after, but the mountains brought them together upon all else in the world and their own lives. At the end they loved each other doubly more than at the beginning, because of these added confidences which they exchanged and shared. It was a new bliss to her to know a man's talk and thoughts, to be given so much of him; and to him it was a bliss still greater to melt from that reserve his lonely life had bred in him. He never would have guessed so much had been stored away in him, unexpressed till now. They did not want to go to Vermont and leave these mountains; but the day came when they had to turn their backs upon their dream. So they came out into the plains once more, well established in their familiarity, with only the journey still lying between themselves and Bennington. "If you could," she said, laughing, "if only you could ride home like this." "With Monte and my 6-shooter?" he said. "To your mother?" "I don't think mother could resist the way you look on a horse." But he said, "It is this way she's fearing I will come." "I have made one discovery," she said. "You are fonder of good clothes than I am." He grinned. "I certainly like 'em. But don't tell my friends. They would say it was marriage. When you see what I have got for Bennington's special benefit, why, you'll just trust your husband more than ever." She undoubtedly did. After he had put on one particular suit, she arose and kissed him where he stood in it. "Bennington will be sorrowful," he said. "No Wild West show after all. And no ready-made guy either." And he looked at himself in the glass with unbidden pleasure. "How did you choose that?" she asked. "How did you know that homespun was exactly the thing for you?" "Why, I have been noticing. I used to despise an Eastern man because his clothes were not Western. I was very young then, or maybe not so very young, as what you saw I was when you first came to Bear Creek. A Western man is a good thing, and he generally knows that; but he has a heap to learn, and he generally don't know that. So I took to watching the Judge's Eastern visitors. There was that Mr. Ogden especially, from New Yawk, the gentleman that was there the time when I had to sit up all night with the missionary, you know. His clothes pleased me best of all. Fit him so well, and nothing flash. I got my ideas, and when I knew I was going to marry you, I sent my measure East, and I and the tailor are old enemies now." Bennington probably was disappointed. To see get out of the train merely a tall man with a usual straw hat, and Scotch homespun suit of a rather better cut than most in Bennington, this was dull; and his conversation, when he indulged in any, seemed fit to come inside the house. Mrs. Flint took her revenge by sowing broadcast her thankfulness that poor Sam Bannett had been Molly's rejected suitor. He had done so much better for himself. Sam had married a rich Miss Van Scootser of the second families of Troy; and with their combined riches this happy couple still inhabit the most expensive residence in Hoosic Falls. But most of Bennington soon began to say that Molly's cowboy could be invited anywhere and hold his own. The time came when they ceased to speak of him as a cowboy, and declared that she had shown remarkable sense. But this was not quite yet. Did this bride and groom enjoy their visit to her family? Well, they did their best. Everybody did their best, even Sarah Bell. She said that she found nothing to object to in the Virginian. She told Molly so. Her husband Sam did better than that. He told Molly he considered that she was in luck. And poor Mrs. Wood, sitting on the sofa, conversed scrupulously and timidly with her novel son-in-law, and said to Molly that she was astonished to find him so gentle. And he was undoubtedly fine looking, yes, very handsome.